All right, so tonight we're going to be moving on from our standard method of working, which has been which has been driven modeling, which is essentially we've been drawing sketches, we've been making things out of solid objects dimensionally, so in numeric inputs, that sort of thing. But we've been building it very architecturally effectively. Tonight, what we're going to be doing is really moving on with the sculpting project stuffs, or the sculpting workspace, which is in Fusion, the form space. Now, is that the only workspace within Fusion? No, but it's the one we're going to be focusing on. Now, we did discuss last class the basics on the form tools, the terminology, the basics on that, as far as how we're identifying both different elements of the form, some of the basic tools we're going to be using. So we're going to be able to jump right ahead with that tonight. So what we're going to be doing with is, and I'll explain the assignment in a moment, but the project for this is going to be creating 3 different utensils. Now that's basically like kitchen utensils. That can be a spoon, a fork, a spork, which is a lovely combination. Anything like that. I'm going to show you how to do like a basic kitchen knife, maybe a ladle, or what is it, a pasta spoon, whatever. It doesn't really matter. This is simply as many projects are, it's simply a more identifiable model that utilizes the tools that we're focusing on. But the main thing is going to be going to be creating 3 different models. Now, does that mean different files? No, they're all in the same file. They're just going to be 3 separate components. These can end up being 3 separate iterations of the same type of thing. They can be 3 completely separate, and you mix and match in between there. But I want to show you on the board here. Hopefully, y'all can see online. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to scoop this along here. But this is, again, just a brief overview of the basics of what we're working with. So the basics on how we're functioning in the form tool space, because like we've experienced in Fusion, you start a different tool space and your entire interface changes, because rather than gum up your interface with all of the possible tools, Fusion changes its working tools to fit your workspace. So basically think of it in terms of just like when you start a new sketch, all of your tools change, same diff here. So our main tool, once we create our basic forms, is going to be the form edit tool. Now that's going to be a way of allowing translation of your forms based on selection. What does that mean? It means you are selecting that form and basing your moves based on either faces, which is a 3 or more sided plane or planar cell. Basically, it's a shape within the shape. You can select edges, which are line segments that surround a face. So think of like if it's a square, it's a square shape, but it also has its actual edges. It would have 4 edges. Same idea with vertices. A vertice is any point where 2 or more edges meet. So think of like your square, different shape. If you have a square, whether or not it's actually square, rectangular, or somewhat kind of morphed in between, you're going to have the face, which is the general center area. With that there, the general center area. The edges are the actual edge lines, so these can be treated as line segments. And then your vertices are any of those points, any of those corners. So that's the breakdown, and that's essentially how things get selected in the form edit space. Now, how this whole thing works is that the form tools in Fusion work off of T-spline modeling. And we went over this a bit more in depth last class, but T-spline modeling is a way of selecting any one of these faces, edges, vertices or multiple faces, multiple edges, multiple vertices across a form, and translating. What that means is pulling, pushing, stretching, extruding, shrinking, scaling, anything in between. That's what translating means within this sort of modeling. You're moving it around. Think of it kind of like clay. If you're actually mushing clay around, the difference is this is digital clay and it's all based on math. And the math of it is geometry and advanced geometry. I'm not smart enough to explain any of that to everybody. So, but what a T-spline means is within your workspace. Sorry, dropped my marker off there. Let me just edit or erase some stuff here, give us a little bit more space. Your overall form, if it's a sphere, whatever have you, tell you what, we'll go ahead and do that because a sphere in this case could be defined as more of a globe. It's going to have latitude lines, it's going to have longitude lines. Now, obviously, with this, you want to keep it much more simple, but you have all of your, any of these edges. You get the idea. You have any of these faces. And across the whole thing. And any of these points, vertices. Now you can see up at the top here, yeah, you're gonna have one vertice for all of those edges, all those faces coming up. So, like I said, it can be one or basically two or more edges converge to a point. It could be 20 different edge lines converging to a single vertice. So that's what I mean by it. The numbers themselves are going to be all over the place. But in T-spline modeling, essentially what it's referring to is at the edge, it makes a T. That's literally what it's referring to. At the edge of a form, even if this is a virtual three-dimensional form, at the edge of what I'm seeing, that's a T. It's very straightforward. But in any of this modeling, think of this whole form as a net. Think of, fish nets, whatever you want to go with. Some sort of a net. So if I grab one of these points and pull, it's going to drag everything with it. If I grab more than one point, it's going to start dragging everything with it. That's essentially the breakdown of modeling we're working with. And that's how T-spline modeling works. Now, there are different types of modeling, and it's a different set of mathematics, different geometry, but they all function very similarly, especially in the case that we're working with, at the level we're working with. You get much more advanced, yeah, there's different ways. There's one's called NURBS. It's a different type of modeling. It's simply a different mathematical algorithm for grabbing faces and edges versus T-spline modeling, which is a little bit more, I won't say basic, it's just a different way of working. That's pretty much the breakdown. So that's more or less what we're working with. So let's actually talk about what we are specifically doing. So give me a moment and let me pull up the screen and all that up. Okay. So the modeling we're going to be working with is you are going to be, like I said, modeling 3 separate kitchen utensils using the 4 meta tools. This is very open-ended as to what you're modeling. It's up to you. Doesn't really matter. This is very much a recognizable set of shapes that you can explore the form workspace. That's really what that comes down to. So again, you're going to be creating 3 different utensils. Sorry, let me correct myself. 3 separate utensils. They have to be different enough. They don't have to be individually different, or rather they can be individually different. Sorry, I'm getting all my words backwards today. But they don't have to each be their own completely new utensil. They can be iterations. So that's what I mean here of at least 3 utensils. Each must also be its own component. We discussed components at length over the last 3 projects. Must be their own component. Make a separate component for each object. You can essentially make all of them on the same component and then just drag and drop those bodies onto different components if that works for you. It's up to you. Depends on how you want to work. Create your utensils using the Form Create and Form Edit tool space. Form Edit just being the main tool we're going to be working with. We're going to be using a variety of them. Like I said, they can all be different iterations of the same, or they could be completely different entirely. It's up to you. You will add whatever details you like using whatever methods you like to make them more unique, meaning that you can use like our basic sketch, cut, extrude and cut to create fork tines or slots in a spoon or holes in a strainer, that sort of thing. We're making the general form with the form tools, and then you can make iterations with that. And of course, our standard of make some appearances. So again, that could be like a fork, a spork, a spoon, a knife, a spatula, yada, yada, yada. Again, this focuses on using the Create Form workspace, creating and modifying those basic forms, using the spheres and specifically things like sphere and plane. I'm going to show you how to use that. Applying symmetry tool, which will be how to, depending on what you're using, to actually make it symmetrical. We're also going to be going over the bridge tool to link different parts together. Experiment, and this is very true, as I said with the last non-assignment, but our overall discussion, experiment, play around, because whereas how we've been working up to now has been very more or less linear in that you create a sketch based on some dimensions, you extrude that sketch or revolve or whatever, bring that into direct 3 dimensions from those sketches, modify from there, that sort of thing. This is much more free form. This is more of a sculpting space. So you're starting with some general dimensions. From there, go nuts. And again, appearance tool. So let's switch over and get to Fusion. So these are 3 spoons modeled, the same spoon stretched out over 3 different bodies. And this should, the original spoon, and then a spork and a strainer. And you can see the original center one there. The more or less spork, very simple, has had its tines created through the sketch and extrude method. The holes in the ladle have had same sketch, extrude, cut. There you go. Now, that's a really simple version. And we're going to go over how to make a simple spoon tonight. Other things are going to be, other options could be something like more advanced tools. I showed you before how to use radial symmetry to create exactly that, symmetry and around a central radial point. And I use that to create, and the same tools of the spoon and such, to create this very basic pasta server. Is that perfect? No, but it's very much an experiment in how to use those tools differently. Now, a completely different way of working is how to create this knife. And this was actually created by deleting vertices and allowing parts to then connect, or on its own, or through actually a different set of tools, which is called welding vertices. And I can certainly go over that too. Other thing is the appearances were applied to this. Appearances don't have to be applied to an entire body. You can apply appearances by faces as well, and that's how this is created. But one quick thing to show you is where these spoons and such like that, symmetry would have been straight across down the length of it, looking upwards. This knife was created with symmetry, but instead going from left to right on a different plane. So you could apply symmetry, get symmetrical forms, just not necessarily on the same way. Quick, simple ways of working. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with some basics. Unless we had questions. Nope, I'm good. All right, so first things first, as usual, and as you should, let's save. So examples, spoon, as the tick would say. All right, so first thing first is, well, you can start with create form, but I want it to look like something. So I'm going to use first the, oops, not that. I want to insert a canvas. It was that tool. insert from computer, looking at downloads. Where is my, nope, it's in pictures. Where did I leave that? Probably in classes. This is what happens when you forget what you're doing all the time. Maybe it was up one. Ah, my spoon. So you can, of course, import an image. Standard procedure, select a plane, scale it up to what you want. We'll make it a little bit bigger for now, call it good enough. All right. Now, of course, the other thing is going to be if you're scaling this to this image to a size, you want to know what an actual spoon would be like. So let's just say this spoon is about 5 inches, which means about 130 millimeters. That's not exact, but close enough. So first, we need to calibrate that canvas. So expand the canvas drop down, right click, calibrate. Remember how to calibrate is you pick a point, 2 points on a canvas, not the edges, but the points of the actual image. So there and there, it says 50 millimeters. That's how big it currently is. Not good enough. I need that 130. Enter, boom, blows it up. Now we actually have a usable canvas to work with. Excellent. All right, there's my starting point. You do not have to start from an image, but it certainly helps if you're referencing something more specific. So let's enter the form space. Sorry, I've both had enough and not enough coffee. It's a strange superposition of energy. Anyhow, what we're going to start with is I want to create the bowl and the handle, and I'm going to use that using 2 separate tools. Now, normally we have started with sketches, and you can absolutely start with a sketch, but I want you to start instead using one of the predetermined forms. And in this case, I'm going to be using sphere, and I'm going to use the globe sphere rather than the quad ball. The difference being sphere is more like a globe, like I said, with longitudinal and latitudinal lines, and a quad ball is more like it's an actual square that has been blown up into a sphere, which is much more akin to like a soccer ball or something like that. Not actually, but close enough. But I'm also going to be using the plane tool to create the handle. We're going to create all of that, bridge them together, and then thicken it using the Thicken tool, to make the whole thing. All right, so let's first start with the sphere tool. So like normal, if you're creating an image, sketch, actually image, or anything, you have to pick the starting plane. Now, I don't have to start right smack in the center, but we can move it around. So let's go ahead and approximate that spoon. But you know what? I don't like working right there. I'm going to build right in the center of that drawing or that image instead. So again, create sphere, working on the XY plane. I do want to work right on the Y axis because that's already bisecting my shape. Start there, but now I want to start as close as I can by expanding the size of that sphere to roughly the size of that spoon, as you can see. Now, one quick thing here. You can see the amount of faces it's already created. These are the other sliders on creating an object. If I slide in, it's going to add a whole lot more. That might make you think, hey, more faces means more detail. No, it means more of a headache. You can always add edges, which bisects a face and essentially creates more faces. This is the modeling with any sketch tool. Any sculpting sort of tools definitely holds to the keep it simple, stupid method. The old KISS. Use fewer faces, and you could always add more later. Now, in this case, 4 is a little bit too few. Let's go with 6. That gives me a little bit to work with. Now, longitude, we could probably dial that way back. 4, that's a few too many. And you can see when I go that low, you can see how it starts to kind of flatten out on the sides. Let's keep it to 6. That's a good amount. That keeps things round enough, but it also keeps the whole thing simple. Keep it simple. Now, you can apply symmetry already. You have mirror, which is, remember, mirror is on either side, or circular, which is, in this case, since it's a sphere, I can work in the round. Right now, I'm not going to apply any of that just yet because I want to show you how to apply that afterwards, but you can attach it here. So if I went with mirror, I go across. Now, you are going to run into a problem here though. Oh no, I accidentally deleted it. I hit cancel instead. Whoops, that's my bad. Right again, right about in the middle. Sorry about that. Was it more like 29? Sure. And I didn't put it right where it should have been, so we'll move it around again in a minute. That's okay. All right. Got it 8 and 8. That might be too much, so let's again dial it back to 6 and 6. Now, one quick thing here. I'm going to want to move this face outward or by vertices, so 6 might be too few. If I go back to 8, now you can see there's a vertex right in the center that I can drag outward. This will make a lot more sense in a minute, but this is one of the times where actually a few extra might not be a bad thing. So 6 on the latitude, 8 on the longitude. That's going to work a lot better for my needs, especially because now if I want to apply mirror faces, you can go through the selection here. Width, that's actually going to be exactly the symmetry I want, or height symmetry, which is top and bottom. I don't want that. But I'm going to leave mirror off for the moment, and I'm show you how to apply it afterwards. Just if you need to, if you find yourself in need of being able to do so. Select OK. All right. Now I've got my shape. I'm going to change from appearance mode to auto assign mode. So I'm going to press Shift in, Shift November. That just automatically assigns a color to my form. That's all. All right. So let's select this, double click to grab the whole thing, and I do want to move this. So I just pressed M for move that up more or less about right, not the center of the spoon, but the center of like the bowl. Okay, that's all. That's pretty much where I had it before. All right. So from here, we are going to start manipulating this basic shape. Now I want to create a bowl. So first thing I want is, I don't want a sphere, I want a bowl. So let's chop some parts off. So I'm going to go to the right view. I'm going to use a from the right moving left selection box because that will select everything the box touches. That selects half of that sphere. And I can just press delete. Now I have a hemisphere, but it's not a solid hemisphere as we've been working with. Let me close or hide the canvas for a second. You can see it's actually just a surface. It's just the bowl itself. That really helps out with the modeling. So the main tool we're going to be using tonight is the edit form. That's the first one on your toolbox and the first one on the drop down. And as you can see, if I mouse over, it says manipulates faces, edges, and vertices with transform, scale, and rotate editing. So you can transform, scale, rotate. Yeah, exactly what it just says. Again, your selection features or your selection options are faces, edges, and vertices. And we can also modify them in slightly different ways. Does also show you one other detail there. Double click a face or an edge to select a loop. What that means is right now, usually the default setting is over here, meaning that it's all. So I can select either a face, I can select an edge, it's just a line, or I can select a vertex. You have the selection filter here, which means if you select vertex, only vertices are selectable. Or edge, only edges are selectable. Face, faces are selectable. You get the idea. But what it meant by double clicking on one, you say I want an edge, but I want to affect the entire loop there. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Double click that edge, and it selects that loop just to there. Double click the other. I should have selected all the way around, but there we are. Oops. I don't know why it's orbiting from weird areas. So that's basically all that means. All right, now let's discuss the other options here. Let me clear out my selection. So transform mode. The default again is multi, which means that any of my selections, let's say I select a face. This is what we went over last week. You have all your options here. You have your rotate, which rotates in single axes. You have your move, which is an orthogonal move with the arrows. You have your scales, meaning You can scale in one direction by the straight arrow or the straight lines, non-uniform one directional scale. If you select the curve, that's non-uniform scale in two directions. In this case, it's the X and Y, because that little gimbal there relates to how the origin plane selector is set out. Or if you select just that center there, that is your uniform scale. That will allow you to scale up and down as you like. And these are numeric scaling factors. So scaling to 0 means it doesn't scale at all. Scaling, or it scales down. Anything above that, it's going to start building outward. Control Z that, because I don't want that. There we go. Cancel that of all of that. Your coordinate space is just that. That's what I was saying, is that is in relative directions or specific directions. Standard selection is all the things. So you can move this in all directions. One other thing is the flat square there. That allows you to move in 2 directions at once. So can I move in 3 directions? No, that's not how your input device, as in your mouse, is set up. If we had a VR setup, you could move in 3 directions. But in this case, you can only move in 2 directions at once. So up, down, left, right in this case, or around on the XY axis, warp around. You get the idea. Okay. So let's start shaping this form into a spoon. So is there any direct way of doing this? No, not at all. You're going to experiment. You're going to find out what works best for you. So in this case, I am going to isolate. I'm going to use a couple of edges. Now I can start to select just one edge, move that around, or I can start to drag both edges. But you see, if I just have one selected, it is not a uniform move. If I had selected both of those edges, now they both move in one. Now this is where instead, where I could have applied symmetry, this is where you do want to have symmetry on, because I don't want to have to keep jumping back and forth, making sure both sides match, blah, 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 blah. So let's cancel out of this first. And the next tab over is symmetry. You can drop down. We went over what these mean last week. Mirror is internal, external is duplicate, so it's just copying it. Internal symmetry is symmetrical within the shape. So let's select that. And how this selection works is you select a face on one side of an edge and a face on the other. Oops, I already had it not symmetrical, so that's going to mess me up quite a lot. So let's go ahead and backtrack a little bit here. Looks like I accidentally made some shapes that I didn't mean to. Oops. There we go. Okay. So this is why it is important to apply symmetry before you start doing too much modeling. So let's select there. Now, when I select on one side of the face and the other, now that green line appears. So I could have just saved myself the headache and just applied symmetry when I was making the object originally, but I just wanted to show you how to apply it afterwards. So select OK. All right. So now you have that green line going straight down the center. That is showing your mirror line. So now when I go to edit form, if I want to grab just that edge, now I can drag and it pulls both edges over. So pretty straightforward on that. All right. So let's start figuring this out. What you want to do is we're going to select basically whatever makes sense for you to start moving things around. You can drag all the things over. Now, me personally, I often like working with vertices. It just makes a little more sense to me. I'm just dragging by the actual edges. Or sorry, I just said vertices. So I'm going to use from the left selection box up there and start dragging stuff over. Now, one thing you'll see is it's pretty harsh. There's one other element of your selection tools that will help you smooth things out. And that is, if you look down on the toolbox, there's soft modification. Now what this is, and let me Control Z that so I go back, click this checkbox, and now you'll see, as I zoom in on the shape, you'll see some of these have started changing colors. Now you'll see it starts as black, goes to red, instead of going around, and diffuses out to white. Sorry, it's not orbiting around the object for whatever reason. So you have your options of selecting from extent and transition types. You have your smooth, linear, and bulge, and you have your distance, face count, and rectangular. What does that mean? Basically, what it relates to is how far out the effect of this occurs and what sort of smoothing effect it has. So it makes a little more sense when I select edges. You can see it a little more clearly. So when I select this edge, you can see now, by default, you have, it starts black, it's red, and kind of fades out to white. That is the area of effect of the soft modification selection. Now, how this works is either distance, face count, or rectangular face count. All that means is just how far away. Distance, you can put in an actual numeric input. Face count, you can see it measures outward from the center selection and how many faces out. Right now it's 1. Put in 2, and you can see that area expanded out. It's red going a little bit further, and white, or transitions to white, now 2 faces out. Obviously, if I select 3, that area effect goes even further from that center one, 1, 2, 3 faces away. So that's all that means. I often prefer to use the face count method selection extent. Again, it's just what makes more sense to me. You use whatever makes sense to you, or don't use this option at all, whatever. Now, the other options are you have transition, which is smooth, linear, and bulge, and you have weight, which means the weight is how much effect it has within the range you have moved. So let's drag this single line out. I drag outward, it's a smooth transition. Now that movement is much smoother. I didn't have to go in and move every single little vertex around, and it keeps the whole thing, again, pretty smooth. If I select linear instead, it changes. Now, because I didn't move much at all, as I drag, you can see it's much more of a direct uniform shape, as in it's in a bit more of in a direct line. That actually helps me shape that bowl pretty effectively. So maybe I'll keep it at that. The other option is bulge. And again, it resets every time. So it's dragging the whole thing around and leaving basically what wasn't selected as sharper, meaning that everything from the originating selection outward 3 faces, it's more dragging all of it with you. So think of it in terms of transition smooth. If you want to keep most everything where it was and you're just dragging that one thing you selected and smoothing the transition between, there you go. Linear kind of drags a lot of it together, but in a more or less uniform fashion. And bulge will drag most of the selection and leave anything that isn't selected alone. So that's really how that selection effect works. So let's Control Z out of all of that because I don't want any of those, but I did want to show you how those work. All right, reactivate the edit form. And since I saw soft modification, linear worked pretty nicely over 3 face count. That worked pretty well. So what I'm going to do is use the arrow key or the arrow selection and just drag that forward to about where that spoon is. Okay, now it drug a lot more than I wanted. So maybe what I should do instead is back up. I don't know why Control Z doesn't usually want to function well there. Let's bring that down to 2 faces. Now we're going to drag Batman into this soon. Drag that out, and that gets a little bit closer to what I want. Dang it, it keeps doing that around the selection. Nice, nice. That's about what I want. Okay. Now from there, I'm going to select that back edge and do the opposite and just drag the bowl closer to where it's fitting the image canvas a little bit more effectively. Nice. All right. Now I need to shrink this because right now this is a hell of a spoon. Now I want to drag from the bottom and squish it all upward. So again, I'm leaving my soft modification selection open. or as it was rather. I realized I had all of the options selected, but whatever. In this case, I think I'm going to use vertices because I can see these a little more clearly. So if I were to select just the bottom, you can see the range go upward of the smoothing effect. Drag that up, and you see it kind of starts to flatten out. Nah, I don't really want that. So let's Control Z. Let's try bulge. Squash that, a little more effective. What I think I just need to do, Control Z, let's just select more vertices. So I'm going to select all of those. So basically everything but the top ring. Oops. I guess I accidentally selected the top ring somehow too. There we are. Why is it moving all the things? Oh, because it's two faces beyond, or my selection is two faces beyond my selection. And that is just, I'm selecting up to this edge. Well, if it's two faces out from there, it's going to also move everything else. So maybe what we need to do is just shrink the face count. Let's go to 1. Now, if I select all the things below, still doing it. Let's change from bulge to smooth. That ought to do it. There we go. Still dragging a little bit just because of the amount of effect, but that's getting a lot closer to a spoon. Not quite where I want, and it's moving everything, but I can always move that back down a bit. Yeah, that looks pretty okay. And pretty okay is the name of the game, huh? There we are. All right. So that's closer to what I want. That is dragging everything, so let's make sure to drag that whole thing down a little bit again. There we go. Getting a little bit far away from me. Okay. Still kind of a deep spoon, but I can still squish this in a little bit more. Maybe not. All right. So other options is sometimes the spoons are more of back a little bit. There you go. So I can drag that. Now, another thing I can do is I can scale this. So I'm going to select OK. I like where that is, but I do want to shrink that a little bit because I can squish it up, but it's still going to be kind of the same. So, God, keeps moving the screen all over the place. I'm sorry for that. So effectively, I just want to scale some of that back a bit. So go back to edit form again. And I'm going to select all the vertices down there. And you can see this effect a little more clearly when I go to 3/4 view. Now, what I'm going to do here is instead of any of the modifiers moving around, anything like that, I'm going to select right in the center. And I'm going to drag that and scale that downward a bit. Down, I said, down, not up. So that's kind of getting a little bit too much. I'm more of made, I think I made more of like an actual, like different kind of, more of like a shaped bowl there. So maybe we'll select just those. And instead of the uniform scale, tell you what, I think I know what I should do. Let's select all of those. And instead, as I pan up, I will select the planar scale, which is the curve right in the center. And let's drag that inward a bit, shrink those. Now, as I orbit around, yeah, brought it kind of to more of a point, but it shrank that whole thing. I think that'll work a little bit better. And now I can drag them upwards. Nope, I didn't mean to scale that. I meant to grab the arrow. Drag that up. Yeah, I'm still getting kind of some weird stuff. So the scale might not have been the way to go. Let's select just that vertice, drag that up. Now it looks like something might have happened in here. Yeah, looks like some weird stuff happened. All right, so let's address that real quick. Sometimes as you're modeling, what you'll end up doing is you'll accidentally basically like crush vertices or edges together or beyond the point that or beyond the points where they should be, and they start to overlap. And a good way to check for this, or you'll run into this anyway, so go to finish form. It gives me errors. So what it's saying here is T-spline failed to convert. So there's problems right here. So let's go ahead and return. And let's see what the error itself says. It is conversion error for body 1, Coincident vertices may need to be welded together. Look for vertices where edges are converging together. Okay, so let's return. Let's talk about how to fix stuff like that. What you do, go to inspect, and, oh, wait, where is it? Utilities, I'm sorry, brain fart. Utilities, which, yeah, that was where you expect something like that to be, and repair body. So select that body and just select auto repair. Now it's going to show you some errors there. And what it already did is now my lines have changed a fair bit. That should be okay. You didn't really catch it doing anything because it's automatically making repairs. Let's try finish form. There we go. So it just changed your shape a little bit, but what it allowed me to do, and just so you know, that gold color is just how Fusion displays surfaces that are just like literally a surface thick. You have your original body color on the outside and a gold color on the inside. It means that there's like no dimension to it. So cool. Spoon's not perfect, but yeah, we'll get there. All right. So now I can go back in and keep working. The other option is that if you've just like totally messed this all up, what you can do is you can repair holes. So let's say, you know what, I've just completely screwed something up on this bottom here. I don't know what's happening. Let me just delete it and rebuild it. So I'm going to use from the right selection box and select the whole bottom there. Hit delete. And now I've got a hole in the bottom. And it's basically showing the same thing we did before that happened when I finished the form. These little lines here that are still standing out, those are just the ghost of the lines before. It's just showing you where that would have been. So from here, I can go to modify and let's go to fill hole. It's pretty straightforward. You just select the edges. Now that's not what I wanted at all. Now you have some options here. This reduce star does some weird stuff. Fill star, a little bit smoother transition. Or collapse, and it all brings all the vertices to the center. So that's essentially what I actually was trying to make it look like, but I wasn't quite getting there modeling it. Just so you know, these other checkboxes here, weld vertices, we're going to get to what that means in a minute, but basically what that means is you have two vertices that are touching, but they're technically not one and the same. It's kind of like when we were sketching and you would have points that overlap, but you still weren't being able to create a closed sketch that you could extrude. Kind of the same here, kind of same thing here. Welding that together makes it a singular surface body. Keep creases will make it a sharp bottom. I don't want that. So deselect that, select OK, cool. So if you kind of took it a little bit too far and just kind of screwed a whole bunch of stuff up, no problem. Delete those faces, use the patch hole or the fill hole, and it fixes the problem. Okay, so that was a very roundabout way of just making a simple depression for a bowl for a spoon. I'm gonna save there. Didn't realize I had a caps lock on. Spoon bowl, if I could spell. Okay, cool. All right. That's all you really need. I'm making a spoon. It's a simple shape. Now for the handle, now yes, technically I could stretch this one of these faces out and work from there, but that's not how I want to work. I want to show you how to create from a plane, which is, in this case, it's a T-spline, just flat plane, and modify that plane and then join these two together. So select that. Select the working plane, which is the same one that we were working on with the spoon. And how it's generated, look at the toolbox. You have 2-point or center. It's the same way of generating a rectangle. So I'm going to start somewhere on the x-axis and kind of try to float it about in the center of that image. Now, that image is not perfectly centered, but it's pretty close. So I don't know, that looks good enough. So I'm just going to drag it outward. Now it's overlapping my first shape. So let's kind of drag it back a little bit. Close enough, close enough. Cool. Don't hit enter, just confirm on your mouse, left click. All right. See, now I can expand that outward. And I can also, same way, you can keep stretching back and forth, but I can also add and subtract faces or edges to subdivide the faces, make more faces. This is again somewhere where you might want to add a few more to start with. But again, keep it simple. You can always add more edges later. Now in this case, I am going to add symmetry from the get-go. Mirror, go through. Lengthwise, yes, it was lengthwise. Widthwise is straight right across the center, but the wrong way. I want it lengthwise. Can you do both? Yes, but that's not what I want here. Just want lengthwise so it matches the spoon. Great. Hit OK. Now I can go about doing the same. Edit form, and let's start moving stuff around. I'm going to use edges this time. I'm going to grab an edge. Now I can drag that back. I can grab that edge, and let's get it close to my spoon there. Great. Move over to vertices, or again, if you want to have them all at your disposal, you can select Option All. And let's say I want to grab just that vertex. Now I can drag that inward, and you see how it starts to reshape my entire spoon. This is why you don't want to have too many edges here. If I had a whole bunch of, cutting up this spoon, one little move is going to make barely any impact. But if I have fewer faces, then one little move has a much larger, but also longer impact, much smoother transition impact. That's all. All right, grab another vertex. Yeah, let's drag that around. Does it always have to be straight? No. Move that around. All right, let's drag that outward, make that kind of weird. Cool. Grab that vertex, drag it straight out. All right. So now you can start to see how I'm making basically a spoon shape. Now, what if I want to make this a bit smoother? This whole back end is a lot smoother. You can select just that point. Let me hit OK first. Select just that vertex, hit delete, and it's going to round it all out. So you're going to have a little bit more to work with, but it also deleted that. So those two edges just got converted into a single one. So go back into the edit workspace. Now I can select that edge, drag it outward. Now, if I'm trying to get this to reshape a little bit better, let's try the scale tool. Hey, that's getting me much closer. Great. Now, if I drag that back, that matches pretty darn close. So this is what I mean by just experiment, play around. The worst thing is, all right, delete what you did and throw another plane down. I'm just dragging dots around so that it better fits what I want. All right, so it looks like I really need one more face or one more edge here to help me better define this. So let's hit OK. I keep talking about insert edge. Let's actually use it. Insert edge is the other default. It was one of the other default ones on top. You can also find it in the modify first one of the second section, insert edge. How this works is it creates an edge, but on a face between two faces. So, or sorry, between two edges. So if I select this edge, now it's automatically going to try to create it out here. Now look at how it's creating it. It is a ghost of the actual original edge that had a vertex and two separate edges. That kind of gets screwy. Let's go this direction, and it is a duplicate of now of this more curved edge going in between. Now the number insert is from 0 to 1. 0 being right against the, or closer to 0 is closer to the original edge you selected. Closer to 1 is closer to the next available edge. Honestly, I think it looks like it'll be better if I start it from that edge. So let's deselect that selection, select that edge, and see it's kind of doing the same out here. I don't want it over there. I want it on this side, and that's all. So if I want it smack in the middle, it's 0.5. That's right between 1 and 0. All right. Now, again, this isn't going to be straight across because I've manipulated a lot of these. That's okay. 0.5 is a little bit too far. I want it a little bit closer over there. Yeah, that looks fine enough. Your other selection options here, insert edge, exact, not rarely going to use that. I'd stay with simple. Insert edge or insert side, you can create two, one on either side of that selection edge. I don't want two, I just want one single. Object snap just allows you to kind of snap between points here. I don't need that right now either. So yeah, it looked like it was at about 0.3. So I'll just put in 0.3. Great. Select OK. Now, because I have mirror on, it did it on both sides. Good. Go back to edit form. And yeah, let's drag this around a little bit more. Get us a little bit closer. Looking actually pretty close to what I want. Cool. And again, you don't have to make this specifically an original, or you don't have to make this specifically copying an existing object. I'm using an image as reference to help me model this. If you want to use something as a reference and then just kind of go off the map, totally fine. Okay. Last thing is I'm going to expand this point out so that I kind of get a little bit more of a neck going. All right. So obviously I've created two separate form entities here, and I need those to join. So let's select OK. We save. Handle. Now, one thing is, you see I'm saving stuff. Look down at the history slider. It's not making anything new. That's because this whole form space works the same, or it captures history in the same way that like the sketch workspace does, in which it doesn't it doesn't take down history. You have your Control Z and Control Y, or Command Z, Command Y, but you don't have actually save points. So all your modeling, unless you're going to continue to adjust it, has to be done in one single session. So keep that in mind. All right. So what I want to do is I want to, it's called bridge these two together. So go to Modify, third section down, Bridge. How this works is you see your selection box. It says side 1, side 2. Follow curve, we don't really need that. Preview, makes sense. I would like to see a preview of this. And number of faces. Let's keep that simple. Let's try just 2 for now, and we can always figure that out later. So side 1, you can see how it highlights an edge there. Now, why is it only highlighting or highlighting that whole section, not just that little one? That's actually the whole edge. So select there. All right. Now, side 2. Now, I do have mirror on, so it's going to do the same with both. It's giving me a preview here of what it might look like. Now, it doesn't look like much because it's very close together. Now, one thing is these arrows are pointing in a direction. What that means is that's kind of the direction it's going to go in general. Follow curve, there's no curve to follow. So don't worry about that. So let's see what it looks like. Let's hit OK. That blended everything together. Made this big wide edge. Not bad. Now, it did make this a lot wider than I wanted it to. That's okay. I can go back, edit form again, go to vertices. I'll select that one. Oops. Shrink that down. Now, watch out for the front there. If I move too far forward, it's going to overlap some stuff weirdly. You do not want that to happen. So just be a little cautious as you're making some adjustments. You can see how that bridge worked. Maybe what we should have done is just use one face. Let's try that. Let's cancel that. Control Z, get out of the bridge. Do it again. Go to bridge. This time I'm selecting the side of the handle first. Doesn't really matter. Just selecting them differently. Other side of the bowl. Let's go to one face. See what that does. Made it a little bit smoother. Okay, cool. So 2 faces was too much. 1 face worked. Now, 2 faces might have worked better if the gap between the handle and the bowl were a little bit larger, but I made it pretty close to start with, so that's where we are. All right, go back to edit form. I want to get this a little bit closer. Now you can see that it's a much smoother transition. Careful going too close. Now, look at what happened to the handle here now, it shrank a bit. That's okay. Grab that vertice, drag it out a little bit. Cool. That's pretty close. All right. Hit okay. Now, I have a spoon that's kind of a little wonky in that that's a painfully flat spoon. What we're going to do here is we're going to use the Thicken tool to give it some dimension. But first, I think I would like to actually move this a little bit so my spoon has a bit of a curvature to it, you know, like a normal spoon would be that hadn't just been run over by a car. So let's go back once more to edit form. Now I am going to use soft modification here for certain because I want to have a smooth transition. Now it is a little difficult to see, so let's grab, that whole one. There we go. Now I grabbed the whole thing across. You can just double click it, but in this case, I'm going to drag upward, and I'm just adding a little bit of curvature to my spoon. That's all. Do it again with this one. This time I'll double click that line. Tell you what, let's go to vertice, or sorry, edge selection. There we go. Do the same. And I'm just going back and forth between just complete right and kind of orbiting up so I can get a little bit clearer visual of it. There we are. And let's grab these now. Maybe I'll grab both of them. It is not wanting to let me select some things. There we go. Just trying to get to that. In this case, I'm just tweaking this. I got a little bit far. Yeah, just a little bit of a curvature, that's all. Okay, cool. There you go. All right, so now my spoon has a little bit of a curve to it. Last step with this is going to be using the Thicken tool. So now this whole thing is essentially one surface thick. Think of it as a sheet of paper. Yes, it has a compound curve for it for the bowl. This handle is all curved and such, but it's got the thickness of a sheet of paper. I just would like to actually give it some thickness to make it like a functioning spoon. So you use the Thicken tool, and as you mouse over, you can see it thickens the body. It's another offset tool. Just like shell hollowed out a solid, this goes the opposite direction, and it basically extrudes itself in one direction. But it's a omnidirectional thing, meaning that it works in all directions relative to the selection. So thickness, let's just say 2 millimeters thick. All right. Now, what it's showing you here, this weird set of like cubicle thing around it, that is the same thing that the display mode allows for. We discussed this last week. This is simply a simplified way of looking at your object. It's a much more angular geometrical way of seeing a curved object. It's not actually affecting your form. It's not actually making it suddenly all angular and rectangular. It is simply showing you a much more simplified version. That's all. So 2 millimeters thick is pretty thick. You have a couple of options in the toolbox here. Thicken, sharp allows for a sharp edge. Soft allows for a softer edge. And no edge allows for it just to create I'll show you, a top and bottom surface. Why would you do that? Different reasons that you can then bridge and such later on, but we don't need that. Instead, use a Thicken. Let's go with soft. Direction normal or axis, I would leave it at normal. Now, when it thickens, you can see the edges are curved. And obviously, if I had done it sharp, it's like it's a direct extrusion that then you would like want to add fillets. But why add fillets when again you can thicken, soft? There you go. 2. Yay! Now is 2 millimeters thick kind of a bit much? Yeah, it's a pretty beefy spoon. Yeah, definitely good for thwacking somebody. But you know, or you know, whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's just a heavier spoon. You do you. But that is how to create a very simple spoon in a painfully roundabout way of describing it. But using a sphere or half of one and a plane, modifying them both with edit form in different ways, bridging them together using the bridge tool, and then thickening using the thicken tool to add dimension to it, and you got a spoon. So hit finish form. Let's see if it gives me errors. It do not. Excellent. So if I close that, great. Now you can see, yeah, it's showing me all of the edges for the spoon. That's fine. All right. Now, last part with this would be adding features. I want to, now I can use, actually first, let's save that. Spoon form done. So let's create a sketch, and we're going to turn the spoon into a spork. All right. So fork is just with tines. It's the same shape, just with some separated tines. So I'm going to use a center rectangle right in the, well, center. And let's make that, I don't know, probably didn't need to make it a center all the way out there, but let's make it 1 millimeter wide, and looks like 25 looks good. Okay. Now I do want to round this over at the back here, so it's not just a horrifying one. So let's add a fillet. Oops, not of that. I wouldn't add fillet for that edge. Let's say 0.5. That works. And don't forget to select both. Good. Okay. And I'm sorry, what was, okay. Now I don't need to round out the other one because it won't matter. All right, and now I'm going to end up, I know, give me a constraint warning. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take this sketch and extrude it down through the form here. But first I need to make multiples of this. And we're going to use the pattern tool. I'm going to use rectangular pattern this time. Select that whole image there. I want it to go in 2 directions symmetrically. And you can see making multiples. Let's make 5. There we are. And my extent is, let's go with spacing gaps. Well, it's good enough. Actually, it looks like, you know what? Let's use 7 instead. Whoop. Okay. Looks good. Now, one thing it does look like, I probably should have made that a little bit larger. So let's change that to 35. Oops. It did not alter all of them. Well, that's irritating. Fine. Then I will just move them all. Now, it might not let me because it's a center rectangle. Let's see. Select all of my sketch. Move. Oh, I did. Great. There we go. Yeah, that looks about right. Select OK. All right. Finish sketch. And now I'm going to extrude all of these sketches. Drag them down. Now it does look like I had a mild intersection issue there. So let's go ahead and make this symmetric, going up and down both sides. I do want it to cut. Select OK. Boom. Mighty spork. And let's go ahead and round all those out. Just grabbing all of the internal faces here. What's going on here? Looks like I'm not grabbing all of them. There you go. Not letting me, or it wasn't selecting all of them. Okay, and let's try 0.5 fillet. That's too much. And it's always a problem with selecting fillets. Sometimes it gives you errors. All right. 0.2 apparently is good enough. I just wanted to round that over. Now, would this make a great spork? No, you really should sharpen those edges a bit more, but you get the idea. Okay. And that is how you make a spoon. Last thing would be switching over, appearance. And let's try metal. Heck yeah, I want a golden spork. Boom, golden spork. There you go. So that's essentially what we're looking for. Now, is that the only way of going about this? Not at all. Is that the only way, the only shape you can make? Again, no, you can make whatever you please. Now, the only issue is if you want to make adjustments to this, you cannot then go create form again. You have to go back to that original form down in your time slider and edit feature. Now, say like, you know what, I realized I made this a little bit too thick or something. I cannot adjust the thickness again. What I can do though is I could say maybe I made this handle a little bit large or not large enough. Let's go with that. What I would like instead, edit form. I want to select with faces and I want to select all of those faces and I want to scale it up to give me a beefy handled spork. Yeah, there we go. And let's scale it also just in one direction. That is going to be a heavy handled spork. So that's how you can then go back and make some changes. You cannot go back as like make it thinner or thicker. So you might want to make sure that you make sure you get that right off the get-go. Finish form, it's going to recalculate again. I didn't make any changes to the bowl. I just made it with a significantly like skull knocking handle. I don't know why all that keeps coming to mind, aside from probably all the times I got whacked in the head as a kid from my grandmother. So yeah, a lot of us probably share that memory. So anyway, that's how you could make more of a basic utensil and go from there. So don't forget, you also need to make sure that these are separate components. So that could be one, you could create this and you can make duplicates of the spork before I made any alterations. So history slider back. Now I can say, you know what, let's take that body, copy and paste, make another one. Yep. Let's take that body, new component. Yep. Drop it out. And that will be, I don't know, different-y. Boom. And that first one, bring it back to current. Take that body as finished. New component. That pulls it out. Golden spork. So you can make modifications to a different one entirely now and keep going from there. So that would be the aim. Last thing I do want to show is, say I showed you how to make something like that. This ladle would have been made with a similar bowl, more faces, and I used radial symmetry to extrude upward after thickening to create these tines. But how would you make something like a knife? All right. Let's go save. Example, knife. All right, same deal. In this case, I'm just going to make a quick sketch as a reference point. How big of a knife would I want to make? This I'm just going to leave as a sketch for how big should my knife be. I don't know. Let's make it a big one. It's going to be 300 millimeters long. Way bigger than my printer will print. So there we are. And how big should the blade be? Let's start it at, I don't know, 80. Cool. All right. That's just going to be my reference because that's how I like to work. That's just my preference. Okay, cool. Create a sketch. Now, where would you start with this? I would start with a plane. Now, you can make this in two separate parts too. So I'm going to start with instead of a center point rectangle, I'm going to work off of this plane. And I'm going to start instead with a 2-point rectangle, just how I would normally work. There you go. We'll make it just about half and half, or a little bit over. Okay. I'm just making a plane about that big. I don't need to add any additional faces. one direction, but I would like to add a few going this direction so I have a little bit more to work with. Okay. Mirror? No, I do not need mirror at all because this is not how I'm going to create symmetry within this. Select OK. Now I can, of course, make a, say, a box, and that could become my handle. And it works the same way, center rectangle or 2 point. I'll use 2 point, starting where the blade is going to be. And let's draw it out that away-ish. Now, what I should have done is made it in the direction it wants to go, symmetric, because my symmetry is going to be applied across here. So let's drag this down a little bit. I'm going to get it close enough to where I think the handle should be. Let's say 40. Symmetry, yes, I do want symmetry. Mirror, I want height symmetry. There we are. All right, now is that exactly a handle? Only if you're a clown making balloon knives. So close, but that's okay. I'm going to make some alterations to it in a bit. So let's select OK there. So that's going to be the very basic starting point of my knife. And I just switched over to color view from here. All right, modify, edit feature. Now I can start cutting shapes into this. I would say selection filter vertices, soft modification. I'm going to keep this as linear because to make that curve of the knife, I want to move some stuff around here. But I'm going to start deleting some vertices. Can't be active at the moment. Come on. Dang it. I had it selected. Not trying to move it, you jerk. There we go. So this is how you can start making that curvature a little bit easier. Start just deleting vertices. Ugh. It keeps wanting me to make changes. I don't want to make changes per se. I just want to chop some stuff out. Come on. You can see very quickly how this kind of thing can go haywire on you. So what you probably should do is make this with fewer faces. Let's Control Z that right there, and we'll just kind of make this a cheese knife that's apparently enormous. Or obviously, if you were to select multiple vertices, that would of course help. So we'll select 2 of those. Still pretty funky. So in all reality, what I probably should do is delete some edges. So you can't delete those. That's right. You can, though, by just selecting them. So that seems good. I'm just deciding which ones should be deleted. Okay. So I just cut away a couple of them. No big deal. Now, when I delete that vertex here, if it'll get at it, there you go. Why will it keeps deselecting what I have here? Come on. I just went through this. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Might just be because I have too few. You deleted that one. Fine, then I'll just edit it. Be that way. All right, so what I'm doing is one thing of this, it is important to move just on that plane. So as I drag that around, you can see what I mean. If I were to move it up and down, you're going to get a pretty wonky blade. Not that this isn't already pretty wonky. That's okay. Click that way. Yeah, let's make it bigger. There we go. All right. So by deleting a couple of edges, I was able to make a pretty okay-ish knife. So let's select OK. All right. Now I want to edit this piece here, the handle, or the, sorry, not handle. Yeah, the handle. So what I can do is, again, modify this, just kind of drag this around. Again, play around with this. Let's make the edge, I don't know, let's kind of make this kind of a wonky handle. If you wanted to, say, make this with like hand or finger grooves, what you could do instead, let's hit OK with edit feature. Let's add some more faces here. And let's go with both sides. 0.3, let's say 0.5, right in the middle. Oops. No, not 0.5, just 0.5. There we go. A couple more in the middle. All right. And probably going to need to do that again. Same, 0.5. There we are. And need one more on either side there. I don't want it on both. I want it single. There you go. 0.5. Repeat insert edge once more. 0.5. There we go. Cool. Because what that means is I can go to edit form now. Edge or edit by edge. And that's just because that's how I'm selecting it. I can select every other edge. And if I drag that in, you can see how it starts to create kind of a wonky grip. You know, if you have 3 fingers. Add more to add more grip. There you go. So that's how you could modify features and such. But by adding edges, it allows you to have basically more points to bend against. So, all right, cool. Now what I want to do is I want to thicken that hand or that blade. And in this case, I want to thicken this. Let's give it a little bit more thickness just so we can see what we're doing. Nope, not 0.3, 1.3. There we are. So it is going to thicken in only one direction. That's okay. But what I do want to do here is this is actually a time when I want to use not sharp edge. That would make sense. But instead, I want to use no edge. So select OK. Because what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go to modify. Excuse me. And this is where it's talking about welding vertices together. So I have this gap, and now you can see that I have vertices on either side of that gap. I select one vertex. No, weld mode vertex to vertex. Yes. Come on. Boink. Oops. I wanted the opposite way. Zoom in a little bit. Select one, the other. Remember that just like with using the joint tool, the first one you select is what will move. The second one you select is to where it will move to. So as I look across here, you can see, I can still see through it. Select that vertice, that vertice. Hey, that's not what I wanted. So let's click keep creases. Still did some wonky stuff. Why did it do that? Okay. Sometimes it might not have gotten out of selection. There we go. What I think what had happened, it was still holding on to the previous selection. Cool. Dang it. There we go. Good. Keep on working down the line. Now, this is most certainly not the only way to do this, but it is a way to do this. Okay. Selected keep creases, and now it's got a nice bevel there. Cool. Now, what do you do about the backside here? It's a big open spot. This is where you go and use that same fill hole or fill hole. And in this case, we'll cycle through them and see which one works. But I do want to select keep creases. So select that edge. Yes, yes, yes. Against that edge. So let's try the other one. Reduce star, fill edge, collapse. It's not working on any of them. Uh-oh. Let's see what happens. Let's make sure to also select those edges. And it's hard to see through here. Huh, still not doing it. Well, that's a shame. All right, well, crud. Well, the fix for that would be what we could have done and what I probably should have done. Let's just Control Z back through all of this, all those selections. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I still wanted to, yeah. So before, when I go to thicken, Instead of no edge, let's use sharp edge. Select OK. So now it has extruded everything as a solid. But now what I can do is go in and select those faces. So same process, just coming at it from a different direction. Let me switch view so you can see my selection a little bit more clearly since it's defaulting blue. Selecting those, delete those faces, just pressing delete. Now I have the same problem, only I have the other side already filled in. Now I go to weld vertices and see if it gives me errors. Nope. There we go. And last one. Cool. So same way of going about it, but I already had that. But I already had the side done. Now, the other one that I made before, as an example here, obviously I was able to, I manipulated the faces a little bit more effectively. And what I did is I just used fewer faces. So in this case, fewer faces would have done the trick. Very wonky blade here, but what I can do to extend the two here, I could bridge them. That's not really what I want to do. What I will do though is, and it probably would have been more effective had I made these in two separate forms, but what I'll do is I'm going to take this edge here, or this face, I'm sorry, and I'm going to extrude it. Now, you do have your direct extrude. You can select that face and just drag it outward like we normally would have. And then later, I'm going to fuse these together. Or you could use the edit form, select that face. And remember, if you press and hold Alt before moving the arrow key, it will extrude too. Same deal, same tool, just within the edit form. So a little bit smoother of a tool, but you're doing the same thing. Doesn't really matter. All right, cool. That's it. Now you go around here. Yep, that'll kind of sort of work well enough. Select OK. That's a pretty funky knife, but it'll work for our purposes for the moment. Finish form. Hey, we've got some problems. What do you know? All right. T-spline topology problem. Use modify. Cool. Use modify utilities, repair. All righty. Let's go to utilities, repair. Yep. It's onto there. Let's hit auto repair. It just made some different curves for me. That actually makes for a better knife. So cool. I'm fine with that. Select OK. Edit form again. Yay, no problems. So now all I would need to do is, these are in fact two separate bodies. Knife, handle, join them. Go to our combine, target body there, tool body there, operation combine. Let's go with new component, so it saves me a step. Select OK, drops them into a new component. New component. Funky knife. There you go. And from here, I could, since they're now joined as a single body, if I want to apply appearances, I can't do it by body. But let's see here. I know there's wood in here. There we are. Ooh, rich mahogany. By default, if I drag and drop, that makes the whole thing a mahogany knife. I don't want that. So let's Control Z. Bring the appearance back up. At the top of the appearance toolbox, you can do this by faces. Select the faces. And now I can literally just drag and drop by face. So you can apply appearances to sections of a body without having to do to the whole thing. It is a little tedious. You can pre-select them, but sometimes it also starts to select other chunks of the body, so it just gets to be a pain. So I found it's just sometimes, unfortunately, easier to do it this way. It's not more effective, but it's easier. So there you go. And that's how to create, in this case, in the scenario, a very rough knife, but you get the idea. Okay, so you're making some sort of utensil. You could base it off of a canvas image if you like. That's up to you. You're making at least 3. If you want to make more, go nuts. You are not required, or you are not constrained to any type of utensil in general. It's simply a way of working, or it's simply a goal model. You are looking for, ultimately, you've created it within the within the form workspace, and then you can modify it outside of the form space. It can be iterations of the same. It can be completely different ones. Just so long as they are recognizable as some form of the utensil. Make a spatula, whatever. That they are differenty in somehow. And I don't mean that one is one color, one is a different color. I mean, they are physically or virtually physically different. That's pretty much it. So that's a really simple rundown of some of the tools of the form workspace. How you can manipulate some of them, and some of the different ways you have to order your operations so that you don't run into problems. And you might have to start over. That's perfectly fine. Play around with it. So good luck with it, and let me know where I can help.